you talk about groupthink. That's exactly what Marvel and DC have descended into, to a point where I don't see how they can bail themselves out. Um, I think they should be ashamed of themselves the way they're behaving and just glomming onto everything that they think is going to be long term, when it's most incredibly short lived kind of success you can imagine. Is just to follow a trend.
Look! Look, the dynamic duo!
And comics have always done that, but everything begets something. So if you look at something um, that you see and you just copy it, well, that's pretty hollow. If
Great.
you see something you see and are exalted by it and inspired to take what you have and add on to it, it's a little different.
I agree. And we, by the way, not to interrupt you, but we've had shows literally talking about that. But go on, please.
Um, and so I had to wonder when I'm watching these movies, is there something wrong with me? Well, I don't think there is, because I can watch an episode of some old cartoon show or an old episode of Star Trek and get it completely
Yeah.
without any help from anyone. Well, these Marvel movies, I think I don't know what possesses these people to write things that I just don't understand even going on in the movie.
Yeah.
A lot of them, when they start, they're sequels, obviously, but they jump into things so quickly that they don't even set the stage right.
Yeah.
I think they're exercises in absurdity. I don't know what people think that writing is made up of nowadays. I always thought writing was made up of something you had to kind of get and follow. I don't follow any of them. There are moments, but when Jack Kirby did battle scenes, he knew he had to do something more than just a punch fest.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was a street kid and kind of knew what he was doing when he was, he used to say that, this is amazing what he said one time. He goes, someone asked him why you draw the motion lines, the impact lines when somebody gets hit. And he says, well, have you ever been on the receiving end of a fist? Well, that kind of sums it up right there. Kirby was tenacious and pugnacious his entire life. When I met him, it was one of the most outstanding, amazing moments that contributed so much to my heart, to realize he was a person. To me, he was as close to a perfect person as I could imagine.
Wow. Really? Wow.
He did nothing. He loved everything. He believed in everything he did. He never bailed out to go into advertising and paint whatever in a refrigerator. He was born to do this. And you talk about the fact that that spark has to come along every now and then to upset the cart. Well, Kirby was a wild card.
Yeah.
I mean, he was some little guy that didn't believe in the words that I don't believe in, which is no and can't. I asked myself, why don't I believe in those words? And I don't even know it. They're literally so embedded in me, because, like I said, I don't follow the pack, and the pack is always saying those words, no and can't.
Mm-hmm.
What are they talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it.
Fascinating. I'm just learning just now. I guess something maybe I intuitively always knew, but how much life experience brings to. I've always understood it for art in general. I didn't understand it for comic book art. I think I took that for granted, and I'm learning that from that. In other words, who you are, how you feel, how you think, your life experiences actually translate into what you produce on the page, and transfers onto the reader, because now we get it. It's a fascinating transfer of energy and of knowledge on a subconscious basis. That's beautiful.
And I think it's important too that people, you talk about technology. Well, if you've got the technology to directly look at somebody in a TV screen, take advantage of it. Because if you don't, nothing's going to change.
Agree. Well, the reason The part of the reason why I asked that question is because I have a little selfish interest here. Because
Go
listen,
ahead. Yeah, I want to hear it. I like hearing this kind of stuff.
one of the things that you said, which is very, very true, is that sort of individuality. Nexus was unique. Listen. I remember the time, right? You're being a young teenager, uh, you're growing sort of out of the not out of, but you want more.
You're growing into, I would say.
Exactly,
You're growing
exactly.
into what you're going to be and always will be.
Exactly. But as a fan, as a reader, you're transferring and you're looking at other alternatives. And when I landed on Nexus, it was that the uniqueness. I mean, it was unique. That it was just different from everything else. I say that magic. Oh my God! Listen, I'm reading. I'm reading. Um, The Coming of Galmando. And holy moly, man, the magic is as strong as it ever was. And have you, and can we get, I know you've worked on it, I know you've discussed it, some sort of live action indoor animated Nexus project done. No,
Please.
no other character, and I've seen other characters get made movies out of and stuff like that. Some deserve it, some don't deserve it. But what's happening with that? Can we get a Nexus because that uniqueness would translate to the general audience? What's happening with that?
Well, there's no question it would translate. In fact, I'm going to tell you something that's, I talk about being different and not part of the pack. Well, here's as different as it gets. When I moved from Madison, Wisconsin to Pasadena, California, when I was 33 years old, as soon as I got there, I had this idea kind of bubbling in the back of my head, and that was, well, here I am. I was compelled to go here. This is a survival thing. I didn't know enough about what I was doing, and that compels me to do everything I can to change that. I called it having holes in my head. There were holes that I could not conquer on my own.
Hmm.
So my way was to go and find somebody that others have told me about. There was a school in California, not just art center, but there was a school that I finally ended up going to, and it filled in every hole I had.
An art school, an art school.
Yeah, it was an art
Yeah.
school. I was
Uh-huh.
told by a guy named Glenn Orbick, who was just younger than I was. My first grade teacher was Mr. Owen Campen from the New York um, League days. Um, and he was the first teacher to show me real things, the
Interesting.
fundamentals, because it always comes down to that. Though it may take you years and even decades to understand how big a deal that is. And I'll show you more of what I'm talking about in a moment here, since you brought that up. But I knew that when I arrived there in Pasadena, I was in the very environment that produced all the great shows that influenced my entire life. And I just started spontaneously starting to work on a Nexus cartoon, knowing nothing about what I was doing. Yeah, but that's okay. I don't mind not knowing anything. At least I was doing. And I made every mistake in the book, which to me is the way to learn anything permanently or more solidly. If I remember this incredible thing that George Perez said in a magazine before I got into the business, it was a thing on the back of one of the industry magazines, and he was pointing at somebody, us, and he says, "Don't do what I do. I got in the back door, and it was a mistake. I got in without having the work, put my dues in to really know what I was doing before I was given the consent to start drawing."
Fascinating.
Well, that goes back to a Bruce Lee thing. That goes back to a lot of artists. When I mentioned, don't let me get too off track here, but when I say life is an individual answer, when I met Paul Gulacy when I was like 19 years old and hitchhiked out to Ohio to see him, this was a guy that was a genius from literally like the age of 19. And uh, he's not what he once was, not even close. But what he had was um, was that wild card. And yet, when I met him, he was nothing like the way I thought he might be. He was a very rational, laid back, not too excitable kind of a guy. When I talk about things, I get really whooped up, and I could talk about it for hours. But uh, one day, when I was hanging out with Glacy years later, when I would keep in touch with him, we were hanging out in West New York, New Jersey, and we would hit Roseland, the dance club that was big at the time. I don't know what it is now, but I'm glad it was what it was back then, because we hit the dance stuff. And before that evening, I remember telling him about a scene, just like you guys were telling me, that he did that was profound, absolutely profound. And I enacted it for him. I said, that last panel on Master of Kung Fu, the guy sat down in a tree and he looked very transcendental, and he said these lines. I sat on the concrete on the sidewalk
Hmm.
and leaned up against the lamppost instead of a tree, and I recited the line to him, and it was a moving moment for me, very moving. And he looked at me like, "What's wrong with this guy?" So
Really?
that was I didn't know what to make of that. For a guy that could do the work that influenced every single aspect of my storytelling in a way that I thought was literal genius. And the two guys that I always look at before I start my thumbnails to get a little jazzed up is Glacy and Kirby.
Hmm.
Those are the two. And then, I tend to go, because I don't tend to like what's going on currently, I go backwards in time to the real geniuses that kind of begot everyone, whether they know it or not, in the field today and influenced them. And some of them literally don't know it. But the two guys I'm going back to these days is uh, um, Alex Raymond and Hal Foster. Hal
Mm.
Foster being the literal uh, paragon of genius, a guy that took a year and a half off to research Prince Valiant. I mean, this is totally unparalleled. I don't think people like this can come along uh, in 100 years, maybe 200. We might see another Hal Foster in the coherency of his storytelling. If you
Hmm.
compare a Prince Valiant strip, a single Sunday strip, compared to the Marvel movies,
Hmm.
the difference is so extreme that you don't know what planet you're on sometimes. All I know is that when I see something, I either get it or I don't.
I have to say, on behalf of my partner and myself, um, we both have seen the Nexus animated teaser that's out there. It's simply fabulous. we need this on TV somehow.
Yeah, let me get back and track with that because what I'm going to tell you is let's just call it very unique. When I started this thing in my Pasadena apartment, we're trying to learn animation, and the other guys that heard about it and came in to volunteer, I get very strange directions in life. I call them directives, literally. And one of the directives that I had from the very beginning, and it's been 40 freaking years now, without any real success. What I was told is that it was going to happen, and I knew without even having to think about it that it would change the world.
Mm.
Well, I knew that, and that's all good and nice. That's all fine and dandy. But the fact that it's been 40 years and I haven't had a single serious taker on this is an exercise in absurdity.
Have you made direct proposals and had those conversations? Has that happened or not?
Up the yin yang.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then I got to a point where I just said, "This is ridiculous."
Well,
No.
if I may ask, like, what is there an objection? Is there a rejection? Like, what's the holdup? Is someone so stupid that they're not getting the potential of Nexus? But 30 years, but 40 years, I'm like, I want to see a Nexus live action or high quality cartoon. Are they not getting it? What's the rejection?
Well, a lot of them don't even tell you the reason why they reject something. And all I can say is, if that's the bottom line, fine, because if you don't get it, guys, you just don't get it.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So if I don't find somebody that gets it,
Agreed.
one, I wouldn't work with somebody that doesn't. That's a waste of my life. They literally have to be in tune to me like you guys are.
Yeah.
And other people that see the importance of offering this to the world and changing lives. But just to let you know, the directives that I've been giving are strong as life itself. They can't be underestimated or overestimated. They're so powerful that I work on it. I work on the Nexus cartoon show because I have no interest in anything live action. Anyone can do that, but
Oh, really? You don't want to do live action? You don't want to do
not
Nexus
at all.
live?
No, I'm not at all. Mine, someone else may do it, but that has nothing to do with my inner directives. My inner directive is entirely bringing back Johnny Quest and Space Ghost in the form of Nexus.
Ah, yes, indeed. I could see Kevin making the fist bump, which is, by the way, what we saw in the teaser trailer that you had.
Exactly. It's so HB, it's ridiculous.
Let me ask you this: would you accept help for someone with the passion to say, "Okay, let's try to get this thing done"? Do you accept that, or is that something that you want to keep
No,
control of?
absolutely. I mean, that's the reason it hasn't happened because people will say, "Why don't you crowdfund it?" And I said, "Well, I've been that route, and it's insanity." The two pilots that I ended up making, I've never felt so depleted in my life.
Really?
Yeah, it was the analogy I make is I remember the first pilot I got done making to premiere in San Diego, which went over very well, and so did the second one especially, which was much more professional. I said to myself, I was coming back from UCLA with having worked with somebody who we were working late into the night, and I said, I feel like I'm coming home from a war.
Tell me why. Tell me what. Tell me why. Tell me more.
I was so much was taken out of me, so much was depleted to get to this point. I never felt that kind of energy drainage in my life.
From the point of view of the work, or from the point of view of the energy of the work? In other words, you're pouring so much of yourself into what you're trying to do that by the it drains you, or was it just the hours? And I'm trying to understand.
Well, it's the hours more than anything, but it's also the fact that you're the only one who's responsible for this. I don't care how many volunteers I had that were there to wish me well and work hard with me, but they weren't the ones that conceived this. One person did, and one person is going to be totally responsible for it happening or not happening.
Understood.
And if you assume a role like that, you're getting in the territory. You talk about life through experience. That was, I mean, doing a comic book is fun and a lot of hard work. And I love doing it. But the animation is, try to imagine this. The way it needs to happen, try to imagine this reality here. Here's a guy that works alone, me, has a lot of knowledge about how to deal with people, but also has a very short fuse with incompetence.
Mm,
You see what I'm walking into here? I'm walking into a landmine.
I understand.
I'm going to have to cater to everybody, even the guys that are really good. Because I worked with guys from DreamWorks on the second pilot, and they were, these guys were master animators. They had paid their dues. They worked under the Disney 12 or the 9, and the people that taught them. And I had to reject some scenes because I knew exactly what I wanted. That's another thing I have to really emphasize. I knew exactly what I wanted.
I understand.
Down to the last frame. I saw it, I felt it, I could hear the music, everything was all in my head. Kind of like the way Jack Kirby talked about when Roz would ask him, how do you keep things straight when he was doing the New Guys? And his answer was, I just do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I
It's
just
all, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't account for that. I can't. I don't know. Goes back to the beginning. Where does this thing come from that makes you different from everyone else? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either, but it's there, and having it is a complete obligation to follow through with it.
I agree. I agree 1,000%. And again, that's the price that the artist pays, the great artists pay. It's an obligation to follow through and at a great risk. So when you pour so much into it, and when you walk into that minefield, when you know what you want, and even the professionals who technically may know better than you, but don't understand the vision and are not delivering, that takes everything from you. May I ask maybe a too personal of a question? When then it doesn't transfer into the next most popular cartoon and accepted, what does that do to you? What how do you react to that? Do you get satisfaction in the fact that, hey, I did something I'm proud of, or do you let it affect you in a negative way?
Things that are like when just recently we got the books in from the Battle for Thune World, the 9x12s, I call them.
Yes, we want to talk about that too, by the way. Yeah.
Well, we there was an entire page of dialogue emitted from the page, and I didn't do okay with that. The only purpose of doing these things is to not do it badly. If you set yourself up to doing things the way they were meant to be, and they're not, that's not a good day for me. But to answer directly, because I'm happy to answer things very, very directly. Nothing's too personal for me. When you say how would I be okay with a cartoon that was compromised? Well, that depends on how it was compromised. I'm happy to make compromises within reason. I'm happy to make compromises that I like to use examples. The people of the Enterprise can't afford to land a ship every week, so let's have them beam down in a couple seconds. Okay, that's the kind of good things that come about from being forced to rethink things in a smarter way. I'm all for that. I love that kind of thinking. I think it's important that when you're put in onto the stove like that, the hot stove, you come through with ideas that reflect exactly what I just mentioned there.
Mm-hmm.
It saved you $1 million. I hope you're happy about that. So those kind of things, yes. But if I get a lot of flack from people, I've learned a lot about people over the years. One thing I've learned is, it took me literally like 60 some years to get this. Is everyone's got an angle, and so if somebody like I've got these two turkeys that are working with me with the live action movie, and they're the most inept people I've ever seen in my life. Starting with
Wait, do you mean that literally? Do you have two people working on a live action movie with you? Oh, for
literally.
Nexus. For
For
Nexus.
Nexus, yeah. And
Oh,
for one
okay.
thing, I was betrayed by the person that should have known better. He knew what I wanted, and he said he was going to give me what I wanted. Well, no, it ended up being what he wanted.
Oh my God, no way.
And I'm